forms, and we're seeing one of the ones we don't see very often. We do have a very good presentation this morning from Kansas Geological Survey Department, DASK, and I believe that Eileen and Ken are online.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, good morning.
If you'd introduce yourselves and start your presentation, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to all the committee members. Sorry, we can't be there in person. We were planning on being there in person, and Mother Nature had other ideas, but we're thankful that we can do this remotely over WebEx here today. I'm Ken Nelson. I serve as the Associate Director for Geographic Information Systems and IT at the Kansas Geological Survey, and also help coordinate the activities of the Data Access and Support Center, which the presentation will center on this morning. I'll let Eileen go ahead and introduce herself, and then we're also joined by Jay Calvis, our director at the KGS.
Good morning. I'm Eileen Battles, and as Ken said, I manage the Kansas Data Access and Support Center, so we're excited to present today to teach you a little bit more about what DASK does.
Do you want us to share the slides from our end, or will you be doing that within the meeting room?
We think we can put the PowerPoint up on this end, and if you tell us when to advance slides, we can do that.
That would work just fine. Apologies in advance for our slide animations. So whoever's clicking, we might we might be a little annoying on a couple slides. Well, again, good morning, everyone. Would love to have been there in person again, but glad we're able to join you virtually today. And happy to present to the committee. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. Again, here just a quick recap of introductions. Eileen Battles will take the second half of the presentation, and technology willing, do a bit of a live demo of our portal. Jay Calvis is also online. He's the director of the Kansas Geological Survey, state geologist, and my direct supervisor. So glad to have him join us here as well. I'm sure many of you know him through legislative activities last year. And again, I'm Ken Nelson, serve as our Associate Director for GIS and IT. I joined the KGS through the DASK program back in May of 1995. Eileen didn't join until October, so I have a good 5 or 6 months on her, and I like to hold that over her head 28 years later. Anyway, go ahead and go to the next slide. So before jumping into the what is DASK program and all the background there and the types of things we do, I just wanted to level set real quick. I know some of you may be very familiar with geographic information systems, and for some maybe it's a new term. I pulled this information off a website for a GIS software company, so that the URL there is at the bottom. If you kind of want a little more high-level overview of GIS, that URL provides a really good resource. But GIS, as the name implies, is a system, and it's a system that manages all types of data, but it provides the geographic context. So while data is critical to GIS, it is a combination of maps, data that has been spatially enabled, that has some sort of spatial component to it, analytical tools and applications. So in our world, from the Data Access and Support Center, a lot of our focus is on the data, but GIS really is an information system, but brings the geographic component and location aspects to the technology. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So why is this important? There are various studies out there that reference slightly different numbers, but suffice it to say, it's according to this study that's referenced on the slide, about 80% of big data is spatial. So whether we're talking 50%, 70%, 90%, either way, the overwhelming majority of data has a spatial component. Some data is built from the ground up as a geographic data set, as a GIS data set, and others may just be, like a customer address that, or a customer list that has an address, for example. Well, that address is a spatial component. So when you look, kind of across the enterprise at all the different data sets that we all work with day in, day out, many of them ultimately relate to some place on the earth, and that's where GIS can be very powerful. Spreadsheets and databases sometimes are the right tool for working with data, but they can't do what GIS does in terms of giving you background on a location and how that location of that feature relates to other things around it. That's really what GIS brings to the table. Next slide, please. And this one has an animation, so go ahead and click. So just as a basic example, the power of the point, the classic definition there that I pulled out of Merriam-Webster is, a geometric element that a location is determined by an ordered set of coordinates. So in the GIS world, we would refer to those as geographic coordinates that would have a latitude and longitude, for example. So using GIS, if I have a point location that I'm interested in, I can intersect that point with all the other geographic data layers that I have access to. So for example, and this list could go on and on and on for multiple slides, but if I had a point, I could tell you, well, what's the surface elevation of that point by intersecting it with our high resolution elevation data, really within centimeter grade accuracy. I might be able to tell you the land cover type or the type of soil that point location intersects with, surface and subsurface geology. I could tell you what boundary that falls within. So for example, if it's an address, I could tell you, well, that address is this coordinate on the earth and it falls within this legislative district or voting district or school district or county or city. So it might be a point location that relates to other points, but it can also be a point location that falls within a variety of polygons that can tell me more information about the location I'm interested in. So they're really just kind of endless possibilities when you look at things from a geographic perspective, and really the only limiting factors there is do you have access to the data that you need? And that's one of the things we're here to provide. Next slide, please. So another example here is just a map image on the screen. I didn't want to give the answer out at the top, but why is this exciting? So you look at this and you might say, well, it's kind of a neat looking map. It's a statewide map. Some of the shapes kind of sort of look like counties. There's a whole bunch of polygons, to be specific. There's 9,815 polygons on this map image. But what's significant about this is this map actually represents a statewide aggregation of taxing units. So we've worked on this project with the Department of Revenue since 2011. The first version of this data set we published was in 2011, and we update it annually through a project that we managed through the DASK Center, where we work with the Department of Revenue and every county clerk across the state. And one of our technicians, Brent Miller, that manages the data on this project, receives data updates from county clerks, aggregates that data into a statewide layer, and publishes that online. So that's out there on our portal for anyone to consume as a web service or as a file that they want to download, or just to reference interactively on our website. But where this really gets significant and powerful is for us, the project was really more about kind of optimizing a workflow. Prior to this effort, county clerks would send their data to Department of Revenue. Sometimes they would send it as a GIS data file if they had it in that format, but oftentimes it was just a page-sized PDF of the map. So you can imagine the end user needing to use that data in a regional aspect or potentially even statewide, having some digital data, some PDF maps, makes it really difficult to use that in any sort of automated way. And where this was particularly significant was utility companies, for example, need to report the value of their assets by taxing unit. This data set being available, regularly updated and authoritative, coming from the county clerks themselves, now really optimizes that workflow so they can download the data set, they can embed it within their GIS system and do their analysis and really streamline their reporting workflow there. So this has been very popular. Again, it's kind of a you know, not something that would just come to mind right off the bat when you think about GIS and mapping. But these are the types of projects that we look for. One that really optimizes a workflow, provides a service to state agencies, provides a service to citizens and or private sector, and just streamlines the process, but also generates a data layer that others can use. So we have this concept of a data ecosystem that, you know, a data set that I may need to build for my project is probably useful to someone else. And so when we can work on a project that optimizes the workflow, but also generates a data set that somebody else can use downstream, then that's kind of a win-win and a lot of return on the investment of our time. Next slide, please. So that was just a little bit of background. We could spend a day talking specifically about GIS, and we'll certainly be happy to come back and speak to the committee anytime more on the technology itself. But we're gonna kind of pivot here and talk a little bit about the DASK program, the types of things we do, and then I'll hand off to Eileen to get into some details and demo. So DASK again stands for the Data Access and Support Center. We were formed by our state GIS clearinghouse in by our state GIS policy board in 1991. The GIS policy board was originally formed through executive order in 1989. As I understand, this was before my time a little bit. GIS GIS and state agencies really kind of grew up through the water related agencies. So this is kind of a homecoming to this committee, where agencies like Department of Ag's Division of Water Resources and the Water Office and KDHE all were early adopters of this technology. And there was some initial data development that was funded through the Kansas Water Plan in coordination with the Kansas Water Office. And that group realized after a couple of years of developing data sets that they really needed to have some centralized repository to host the data, to distribute the data, to provide some technical support in accessing the data. And that was really kind of the impetus for forming the clearinghouse. And in 91, as is today, data is really our bread and butter. The types of things we do has grown immensely, really kind of grown up with the technology. But the bread and butter of what we do is the first letter in our acronym is data. We operate under a contract with Department of Administration's Office of Information Technology Services. I believe Jeff Maxson may be on the call or listening to the WebEx here. Years ago, when this was formed, the decision was made, let's put the clearinghouse over at the Geological Survey, and that would make a good home in terms of the operational aspect of it. And so we work hand in hand with OITS, but our center is actually located at the Geological Survey at KU. Next slide, please. I think this one may have some animation, so if you click 4 or 5 times here, we'll see some lines here. So the point of this slide is just that, we are very much a part of the survey, and it's made a wonderful home for the program, in the support that the KGS has provided to the DASK program as well. So we work within the survey in providing support to business administration, outreach, and libraries, to geohydro and geohealth, energy and stratigraphy, and the other programs. But we do the same thing with state government. I think if you advance here, we'll get another animation that'll show some state agencies that we work hand in hand with. So this isn't an exhaustive list of everyone that uses GIS or uses our services, but we work internally with the survey just like we work outside the survey with many state agencies. We also we have relationships with every local government across the state, mostly at the county level, county appraisers, county clerks, 911 dispatch centers, or public safety answering points. So what we kind of provide that centralized information resource coordination effort amongst really local to state to private sector to federal government. And these interactions aren't just a one-time upload of data. These are ongoing every day, throughout the day, every week, every day of the year. Next slide, please. We provide really a variety of services, but rather than just giving you a laundry list and a slide full of text, we kind of broke this down into our big three: coordination and outreach, data archive handling and publication, and application development. And I'll touch on these here individually, but really wanted to stress that you know, our line of work is really tech heavy. We're fans of technology. We love working with it, but we kind of look at coordination and outreach as our enabling technology. We are heavily involved in professional associations like the Kansas Association of Mappers, the Mid-America GIS Consortium, the National States Geographic Information Consortium. I serve on the board of directors for that national group and am currently in the president-elect role. Eileen leads numerous GIS user groups. We have GIS data committees. We participate in conferences and do outreach and give presentations. And we kind of look at that is what leads to everything else. The technology is wonderful. We've made a career out of it, but we couldn't do any of the work we do without the coordination and outreach. That's what leads to projects. It leads to relationships. It leads to database publication. So we focus there first, and everything kind of builds on top of that. In terms of data archive handling and publication, you know, again, that's the bread and butter of what we do. Over time, how we do that and the types of services we can provide has certainly grown and matured with the technology. But you know, we maintain the centralized GIS hub that integrates and aggregates hundreds of terabytes of data, really, and makes it available in a variety of formats. Eileen's going to take a deeper dive into that and give a little bit of an interactive demo here towards the end of the presentation. And then the third bucket there is GIS application development and workflow optimization. And we do a lot of this work. This is something that, you know, the early days of our center back in 95, 96, 97, this wasn't really part of our service portfolio. But as the World Wide Web grew up and GIS software manufacturers started making tools for interactive web mapping applications, then we found that to be a really effective way not only to provide access to data, but a service that we could provide to state agencies. And again, we look at those as very much we don't want to work on a project just to work on a project. We try to be strategic in nature. We try to find those that generate data that then can be shared with other users and contribute back to the data ecosystem. Next slide, please. So this is just a list of some of the projects that we work on. Eileen is going to take a deeper dive into a few of these. We don't have time today to go into every single one, but again, certainly willing to come back to the committee and present in more detail on any one of these if you're interested. But again, these are data-driven applications, many times develop data through the application. So it's kind of a way for us to provide service to state agencies, but use this as a way to sort of feed into our portal, generate data, feed that data ecosystem again. So we work on a variety of projects for agencies listed here, like Department of Agriculture. Eileen's going to touch on the online water use report that just went live here again in January 1st. Another really neat project we do for them, the base flood elevation portal. She'll also get into some detail here on the work we do for the Kansas 911 Coordinating Council, and that's probably the largest project we work on. We work on, as you can see here, many different efforts. 911 is a huge program for us, and sometimes we get the question, what does 911 have to do with the Kansas Geological Survey? And because, you know, DASK's focus isn't necessarily just on geology or natural resources, it's broader scope in terms of GIS. When the 911 Council was formed and wanted to work towards the implementation of next generation 911, GIS is a key component of that. So I think that is really kind of the poster child project for us, where we're able to provide very valuable service to our state 911 council, all the public safety answering points across the state. But as Eileen will talk about, that generates a tremendous amount of data that is useful to 911 but also for many, many applications outside of 911. And that's kind of the classic win-win-win that we're after. Next slide. I think this is my last slide before I hand it off to Eileen. Really, again, for us, the bread and butter is the data. It's all about the data. And this has kind of become somewhat of a popular term in the GIS world is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Historically, I haven't seen a lot of good ROI studies with geographic data. Sometimes it's just references cost avoidance, but we know the ROI is huge when we develop a data set through one project and it's used over and over and over and over, and it's maintained from the authoritative source. There is tremendous value, and that really is at the core of what we do. Again, the technology is great. You know, Eileen will show cloud-based web services and web applications and all the projects that we work on. But again, our mission here is to provide access however you want it in a scalable format and make sure that that data is findable, accessible, and interoperable in a sense that you can use it however you want. So our portal, you know, you can download data, take it, integrate it into your own system, but there are also a variety of ways to just use that online, either as a web service or within a web application. So we think that's where the real value of this program comes in. We provide a lot of services, but it all drives to that core mission of providing access to data. We want to grow the data catalog. We want to have more and more agencies involved and publish more and more data, because then that just increases the ROI of the program itself. So I think this is my last slide, Eileen, right? I think so.
I think so.
So Eileen's gonna kind of step through a few of our projects and initiatives, give you a little more detail on that sort of thing, and then walk through the portal itself. I know we have some slides staged here, and if you want us to, she could certainly hop in and do an interactive demo. But I'll let Eileen take it over from here.
All right. Thanks, Ken, and good morning, everyone, again. Yeah, we've learned the hard way many times. It's always good to have backup slides if you're going to try to do a live demo. So I thought today I would just give you a couple intro slides and some information about our website, talk about some of our big data that we manage and host, and then highlight a couple projects, and then go in and do a demo of the actual website. So a little background here on the DASK GeoPortal Hub. It's pretty new. This particular website was just released about 1.5 years ago. And the main reason we did this big transition from internally developing the website, which was, Oracle based, and we could customize it and kind of grew it all in-house to this ArcGIS Hub platform, was that we really were in need of modernizing the user interface, and we wanted to expand the content that was out there. So our previous website was more of you'd come to the site, you'd find your data, you would download it, and you would leave. The hub gave us a lot more collaborative technology and tools and hooks that you could actually visualize the data, interact with the data, instead of just finding data and leaving. And, that's where we're all used to now. When we go shop for something or we're looking for something on the web, we want to preview it. We want to look at it. So moving to the hub allowed us to let people actually search for content, whether it's a service, a PDF map, or any sort of a geospatial content can be shared through the hub, and allows the ability for the user to interact with the data before they actually download it or move to the next step of how they want to actually use that content. It also gives a great way to actually grow the geospatial content that was shared and put our data stewards in the driver's seat. Previously, when we would add data to our website, maybe it's somebody from the KDHE or KDOT, they would send us a file, whether it was by email or an external hard drive or a Dropbox, and then we would get it, we would review it, and then we would put it out there on our website for download. Well, now, actually, we could go to the next slide. Through the data sharing model, every organization already has an account on this collaborative cloud technology, because we're all on this particular software platform. So it puts the data stewards in the driver's seat so that from their own account, they can decide when and how the data is shared to the public repository of the Kansas Geospatial Hub. So I think if you click one more time, you'll get, and that's not, yeah, the hub. So what this does is we have at this time 9 different organizations, and we're working on growing that at the state level. And these agencies are sharing whenever they have, publicly available geospatial content they want to get out for people to be able to access. They'll share it through this interactive group that then automatically publishes on the hub. And the neat thing about that is there's no delay in sending us a file, and we have to process it, put on the website, so that the data steward is controlled of when the data is shared, how it's shared, and the frequency of those updates. One thing we were concerned about when we moved to the hub was making sure we still monitored the data that's shared on the hub website. Again, previously people would send us data, so we knew what the data was, we would review it and validate it, put it on the website, and that was kind of our QA for the data. So moving to this model, one of our GS developers has created scripts that actually goes through and reviews the data that's shared with this ecosystem on a weekly basis or even daily as needed. And so we make sure the data is coming from a trusted source. We make sure it's maintained and shared with minimum metadata, which would be things like a summary of the data, searchable tags, proper credits, terms of use, things like that. So we want to make sure whatever is being shared out to the Kansas GeoPortal Hub is from a trusted source. It has good metadata and information about the data tied to it, and it is something that we should make accessible to the public to search and find. So with that, I'll transition. I'm going to be doing a demo on the hub here in a little bit, so I thought I'd at least give you an intro to the website, and that's how you'll find the data. But I wanted to talk about a couple of the different big data sets we have in projects before I do that demo. So you can go on to the next slide. Okay, so the statewide LIDAR stands for light detection and ranging. So basically it measures the elevation of the ground and provides a Z value or a height value of the data. This is one of our big data sets. As you can see from the amount there, it's been a very large investment, primarily from federal cost share through NRCS and USGS. It's used extensively for things like floodplain modeling, structural mapping, especially in engineering projects when a particular project might need to understand the surface of the earth and any implications of that construction or runoff from that. As usual, data continues to grow. We've gone through several acquisitions of the LIDAR data. And as the technology has advanced and improved, so has the accuracy. So that's what this quality levels are referring to, that as we've acquired this data, the quality level and accuracy is improved. We continue to collect new data as the funding becomes available. And actually there's a project acquisition going on right now, thanks again to NRCS and USGS, that is acquiring several counties again in Kansas in LIDAR data. So this has been a really powerful data set, for the first time really giving us kind of a lay of the land, understanding exactly a better reading of the surface elevation and what the ground actually looks like from a highly accurate standpoint. So that's one of the data sets we host. If you go to the next slide. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. We also host a lot of imagery. So we always joke that people love pictures of the ground. So we have an extensive collection of imagery that continues to grow. If you wouldn't mind going, if you can, back a slide. There's a list there that shows all the different sources of data. A lot of that is, some of it's come from historical data. Some is collected through the National Agricultural Imagery Program. And these are all different accuracy levels and resolutions. And it kind of depends on the use of the imagery, of why, all these different versions of imagery are collected. We have some higher resolution imagery from the Next Gen 911 project, which I'll talk about a little bit more in detail in a couple slides. So I think the point here is that we've been collecting imagery or pictures of the ground for years, back to even the 30s and 40s, from some historical imagery that has been scanned and georeferenced through some projects with some different agencies and universities. And it essentially has become the base map of Kansas, so that any project we have, it always refers back to the imagery, because that's how you see the growth, the lay of the land. You can georeference objects, things like that. So this is big data. We have over 200 terabytes, which is a rough estimate of data that is archived and stored at DASK. And that is a good chunk of that is the imagery data, the LiDAR data, as well as some other big data sets we have. And then, of course, things like roads and address points and water wells and, different things like that as well. So just wanted to highlight some of the big data sets we have, and how popular they are. Imagery is always popular, especially with appraisers' offices, public works, Department of Transportation. Everybody loves to see the imagery so they can really use that as reference for any major projects they have. Okay, I think we're ready for the next slide. All right, as we mentioned earlier, we work with virtually almost every agency that has any sort of geospatial component to it throughout the state. Really, our drive has been the last few years to create kind of data-driven applications that supports the visualization and dissemination of geospatial data. And it's interesting, all these agencies might have a different use. It might be a particular workflow that they want to improve, and how that data is collected perhaps in the field, or how data is inputted from a user standpoint and they can get information back, and how that intersects with a map. So we've worked on a lot of really interesting projects with different state agencies, including local government partners, like Ken mentioned, the tax unit project with the county clerks. We also host a viewer that you can see property boundaries on behalf of the Department of Revenue, with some appraisal information tied to it. So there's just a whole variety of things we've been able to be a part of, and which has really helped build the data behind the scenes, which is our core mission of the more data people get their hands on it and can input and improve the data, the better we're growing actually the data catalog as well. Okay, so let me highlight a couple of those projects. We can go to the next slide. The first project I wanted to highlight is the Next Generation 911 project. So as Ken mentioned, this has really been probably the biggest GIS project we've ever had in the state. Just to kind of give you a lay of the land, for Next Generation 911, there's 109 public safety answering points across the state. And in developing this, when we started becoming involved in this project, which was actually 10 years ago, it became clear really early that GIS data is really the core component of moving to the Next Generation 911 system. There was, of course, the networking. You had to move from a copper wire-based system to an IP-based system, and all sorts of technical network modernization that needed to happen. But all that was going to piggyback on this geographic information. So we've had a great 911 GIS data committee that's put together data standards, does annual training and outreach with our data maintainers, and has came up with a really nice standard saying, okay, for 911 purposes, these are the data layers that need to be maintained and submitted at least quarterly to support 911 calls throughout the state. So we're really happy to report that we've had 28 straight quarters with 100% compliance, meaning data maintainers are updating their data and submitting it at least once a quarter through the 911 portal. There's several steps involved there. They have to validate their data to make sure it's up to the standard, and then they submit it to the portal. We developed each of these components, the validation toolbox, which is kind of a plugin. The users can plug into their local GIS system and validate the data. We developed the 911 program portal, which is where someone logs in and they submit their GIS data for validation, which is, at that point, once it's validated, we then are the aggregation point of all this data and create a statewide map of the data for the different uses, which includes the call handling map. So that's a picture at a PSAP where a call handler is actually using the map of the services that we publish and host here at DASK. And then also a new emerging technology is coming soon is a responder mobile application. So this is in the very early stages. In fact, the 911 staff is working on getting a pilot together where this will allow responders in the field to actually have a mobile application on their phone if they choose to participate, where they'll be able to see their location, other responders' locations, as well as it'll be using the data that the PSAPs and the data maintainers are already submitting. So it'll be that local authoritative data that's validated through the 911 portal. So it's really exciting to see that not only will telecommunicators be seeing this data used for 911 calls, but pretty soon responders will be able to see this on their phone in the field as well. Okay, next slide. So when I talk about 911, what kind of data layers am I talking about? So this is back to the GIS core. We have some primary data layers that are required. So we're talking about things like road center lines, address points, emergency service boundaries, the 911 department, the public safety answering point, their boundaries, as well as the ortho imagery. So the imagery is really important also for understanding, being able to zoom into a call and see where that's come from. Some optional data layers are listed there. So I think the big takeaways here is really across the state, with the exception of the Kansas City MARC region, they have their own call handling platform. But for the rest of the state, when you call 911, the telecommunicator is seeing a map, which is data that they locally update, maintain, and submit to the portal, but then DASK aggregates and we host. And then that way they can see the most current address points, road center lines, and all the different things we've listed here for their area, as well as the most current imagery for those 911 calls. So it's really a pretty accurate map, and it has been very popular. One neat thing that has come, kind of as a little side note of this project, is now that telecommunicators are visualizing this data and seeing it. When we started this project, there were many PSEPs that had data that hadn't been updated for years. And now the telecommunicators are used to seeing current accurate data updated, immediately. So now telecommunicators are submitting, if they see a map error or a correction that needs to be made, they're actually submitting that information to us, and we're working with the data maintainers to make sure the data is updated in a timely manner. So it's pretty neat that we're getting more eyes on the data, and the telecommunicators are a little more control of making sure the data is accurate and has some kind of a feedback mechanism to provide that information. For next data layers come with 911, there's things like building footprints, indoor mapping. There's always new and exciting things coming with next gen 911. It never gets boring. So always a lot more to talk about with 911, but a lot of really good data has been generated from this project. And maintain and like I said, by the locals. Let's see, one more slide about 911. We could go to the next slide. So I just wanted to mention, kind of give a mention of the 911 imagery program. So this was in the list that I showed earlier, but specifically, we didn't have really a reliably funded refreshed imagery program at any time in the state. We relied on basically any federal imagery that was flown, or just when we happen to have a project that might be some cost share. So when the 911 project came along, they knew that they needed the space map, not only to support the data improvement and the data maintenance of the call handling system, but they knew they needed to refresh it frequently. So thanks to the 911 Coordinating Council and some cost share, we are getting statewide imagery flown really every 3 years at this point as a refresh. So this is another thing that's kind of exciting. This is the background of the telecommunicators. So I've had some telecommunicators email me and say, hey, there's a new building being built there. Why don't I see that in the imagery? Which I just love, because I'm like, well, guess what? Wait a little bit. We're getting ready to fly a new acquisition as soon as the weather cooperates and ground conditions agree later this spring. So with that refresh of every 3 years really helps keep the imagery fresh and available behind the scenes for the 911 project, as well as It's extremely popular throughout the state. It's a high resolution product and it's leaf off, meaning you can see through the trees so you can see properties. So as a result, that is really popular with agencies like KDOT, with county appraisers, or anyone who really needs to like zoom in, see some really close resolution imagery of maybe structures on a property or things like that. And this is all publicly available data that you can view through a image service or download the data and interact with it. So it's really, really neat data that's used extensively throughout the state. Okay, next slide. Let's see here. Go. Thank you. Okay, just to highlight a couple more projects real quick for I need to move on to my demo. We also host the Kansas Water Use Report. This is, as you all know, since we're talking about, to the committee of experts, by law, any water right holder has to file a water use report annually. It used to be done on paper. There's an example of the paper form of how this used to be filled out. And so DASK worked with the Department of Ag and Geological Survey with funding from some different sources to migrate this reporting system from a paper reporting system to a online system. As you can see from that form, I don't know if maybe a few of you in the room have even filled these out. It was a very complex form. It was a trifold paper form. They had lots of fields to fill in. Sometimes people would even draw circles and draw an arrow to something on that. So we had to translate that into an online reporting form. So we did this in phases. It was developed over time. It now contains over all modules for the 14 beneficial uses of water. And the neat thing about this, you're like, well, this is online reporting. What's the geography hook of this? Well, there's a geographic location of where water is being pumped, and that's very important. So this also gets to that point of what's being reported, and the complex database behind it is great for analysis and everything, and important for the reporting system as well. On the next slide, I can give you kind of a picture of the dashboard that's used. So this is a dashboard that we developed internally that's used by Department of Ag as well as the field offices to kind of monitor submissions as they come in. So let's see, last year, 92% of the water rights were filed online. This was kind of a perfect example of that workflow optimization where no longer are paper forms coming in, people having to enter those before the actually data is stored in a database. It goes right into the database. As of yesterday, there are 1,144 reports that have been submitted for this year. So it kicks off every year on January 1st, and it's very popular. It's kind of fun. We like to watch this kind of like taxes. We know when the deadline's coming, so we're like, oh, watch out this week. We know the chart just spikes, and it's kind of funny. We can see all the all the submissions come in, and one of our application developers at DASK was a primary developer on this project, and also has that background knowledge with the water use reporting process. So has done a really fantastic job in creating this application and supporting it. Okay, I think there's just one more project I wanted to highlight before I can scooch over to the demo real quick. So we'll be real quick on the next one. I was trying to bring up some water related projects. You could go on to the next slide, thank you. Which is the base flood elevation project, another interactive map and portal that we developed on behalf of Kansas Department of Agriculture. So the base flood elevation is a computed elevation to which water is expected to rise during the 1% annual chance flood. So kind of the point of this interactive map was before this was created, the KDA staff someone would email them a request and say, oh, I need to know if I'm actually in the floodplain. Can you double check and make sure if I am I eligible for a LOMA or to be removed from the floodplain? Maybe I was improperly included in the floodplain. So what this one does, this is pretty cool because it's behind the scenes using all that big data. A user comes in and draws a polygon around their structure for Department of Ag staff to review. And what it does when they draw that polygon, it extracts the minimum elevation from the LiDAR data, which is that big data, that surface elevation data we have, and for the approximate lowest adjacent grade value. So it does some calculations behind the scenes, gives an estimate if they should be in or out of the floodplain. The KDA staff then has admin tools to review and track and process each of these requests to decide if someone does qualify for being removed from the floodplain or not. They get a variety of different requests, including, can I get a LOMA or an elevation certificate, or maybe there's new construction and they want to check and see if whether or not they're within the floodplain. So it provides a portal for someone to log in, use an interactive map to draw their area, and then get information back from the KDA staff on their inquiry. So have a neat little portal put together. Let's see, is that it for, let's go one more slide. Okay, so if possible, can I share my screen to do the demo? We'll see how this works. Okay, let's see what happens here. Okay. Let me scooch, whoops. Oh, let's see. Let's try that again. Okay, great. Can everyone see my web browser? Okay, super. All right, so just kind of a quick little walkthrough through the Kansas GeoPortal Hub. So as you can see, it's all about the data. The first thing you come across is the ability to search for a data set or explore the data through the categories. Before we jump into that, I just want to scroll down and show you the whole page. We also have this section that highlights any new content that's been added from our project partners. So if you're looking for, you're like, oh, I've been waiting for them to add that latest beta mapper or imagery, whatever it might be, that would be highlighted here. And moving to the Hub also allowed us to add additional information about the DASK initiatives and DASK projects. So for example, if you wanted to know more about Next Gen 911 project, which I talked about today, you could come and click on the 911 project and learn more there, as well as the different projects that we work on at DASK. So as Ken mentioned, we had all those different agency icons up there. There's just a lot to talk about, to go through all the projects, but this would be a great spot if you're interested in learning more information about the different projects we work on. Another thing I want to highlight before we jump into the data is the different organizations that share data with DASK. So on the top menu bar, you can just click on organizations, and this shows every agency, state and federal, that has shared data with DASK. And the neat thing about the hub is we're trying to encourage even local governments that might have their own cloud collaborative environment to share with the hub as well. So this is kind of the beginning of the collaboration with organizations, but we feel like it'll grow quite a bit from here. We want to highlight the organizations that you can click on. So let's go back and just do a search. So if I were going to the data catalog and search on water, immediately it's just like a Google search. It tries to think about, okay, it's trying to match my words or find what might be the best match of my search. So if I just click on water, it'll bring actually a full data catalog list up. And you can see it brought up 129 potential matches based on relevance. So at this point, either you could just scroll through and see if you know the name of the data set you're looking for. There's some filter options on the side here. If you know the type of data service you're looking for, or perhaps the source, like we talked about, the different organizations would be the source. There's tags. Maybe there's a particular word or term you're looking for, or even a category. You can do filtering just like if you're shopping for something. If you're looking for a particular item that you need a particular color or something, this is kind of a similar type of thing. There's all sorts of filter options to find what you're looking for. So if I were to go back up and just focus on the water wells, the WWC5 data, if I click on that, this is really the power of the hub environment. So immediately it brings up an interactive map that the user can look into. So this one has, as you know, tons of points. So once we start zooming in, the points will start appearing, and we can see all the different water wells across the state. And we can pan and zoom around. We can zoom in and out. And as we zoom in, we can also hover over a point and click on it. and get some additional information about that point. So really, this is just kind of a data viewer where you can browse the data, see what's available, you know, maybe look for something particular. Maybe you just need a quick information about, oh, I know there's that new, you know, well, in a particular area. I wanted to know who owns it or some more information about it. You can certainly look at it through this interface. If you go into the full details of that particular item, it'll give you what we kind of call the metadata. So it'll show you the originating agency, a summary of what that data is showing you, some metadata details of the data set, when it was created, when it was updated, the number of records available. I mean, this is getting really into some of the fun GIS stuff, the attributes and fields that are part of the data. And it even tries to show some data sets you also might be interested in. So it's kind of like, again, like shopping. You might be buying a new shirt and they might suggest some other shirts you might like. Same thing, it provides some options of some other associated data sets that you might be interested in. The website also has some different tools here that people can click on if you want to create a quick map or play with the data a little bit more. There's some hooks that you can click on to do that within this environment. You can make a quick map and play with a little bit, but if you actually want to save or do something with the map, you would need an account with the ArcGIS Online environment. So there's some caches there. You can certainly visualize and look at the data all you want, but if you actually want to start using the data and doing some analysis or changing it, you would really need to download the data, which was done here in several different file formats, or have an account where you could use that cloud-based interface to create or do some changes to the data as you want to visualize it. That's how I download the data. Let's see here. If I go back to the website, I wanted to show you also another way you can search data. So you could click on any of these categories. You could click on all data. If you just wanted to say, what data does DASK have? This is just a complete list available. You could scroll through and look through it that way. You could come in and you feel like, I know, if you click on organizations, so you're like, I know I want data that the Kansas Geological Survey published. You could click on that organization and it'll automatically filter for that organization, the data sets that are available. Or another option is, say you're looking for an application. So for example, we highlight different applications shared through different agencies with the hub. And if you scroll down, for example, since we're talking about the WWC5, you can see that here's the WWC5 map that if I click on that would then open the Kansas Geological Survey hosted application. So this gives you more bells and whistles. You know, through the hub, you can see, kind of visualize the data and get an idea of what the data is and information about it. But if you actually go into the application, if there is one available, there's a lot more different layers you could turn on and off. Also clicking at some identifying information about the data. So there's different ways to interact with the data. You might want to come and just download it and put in your own GIS software and use it. You might want to just look at the map service on the hub. You might want to go to the host organization's application to really dig into it, get more information. So there's really a lot of different options for looking at the data. One other application I wanted to highlight real quick is we keep talking about imagery. So there's the Kansas imagery application. And the neat thing about this is it also is kind of an interactive viewer where if you're zoomed into an area, and we're in Manhattan here at this point, and you open the layers file, you can see our whole collection of imagery that are all hosted imagery services. So if you just wanted to look at a certain area and kind of browse through the imagery to see how some area has changed. For example, if I click on one of these data layers, I can see what the area looked like in 2003. Then I want to see how maybe this area is built up. I can click on and say, okay, what's it look like in 2010? You know, it's kind of a neat way just to go through and click on the different imagery, see what has changed, and also give you kind of some historical perspective of an area. So wait for the 2021 to come up, and then finally the highest resolution, the NextGen 911 imagery is 1 foot resolution. So it's really nice imagery once you zoom in. If really, we have a lot of people want to look at, you know, maybe the land they own or the property they bought, things like that. It's really nice image. You can zoom in, pan around, see some great details just through this application viewer. A couple more quick things. I know I'm running into the question time. If I go back to the DASK homepage, there's also a community tab where we highlight any important announcements. We publish quarterly newsletters as well as highlight any upcoming events. If it's a public open event, we'll include the links and information on how to join that. So as Ken mentioned, with outreach, we're always working on ways to work with our user community, whether it's through user group meetings, of course, working with the policy board, attending different conferences and giving presentations. So we try to keep this updated as events get scheduled throughout the year for upcoming events. We also highlight the surrounding states clearinghouse hubs. So many of the surrounding states have a clearinghouse and also use the same hub platform. So if you're like, I really need that data in Iowa, well, there's a link here that you can click to their website and see and do the same kind of a search for their GIS repository to find that data. Final thing I want to talk about quick is if we go back to the homepage last time and scroll down, there's also some links at the bottom here. I just want to highlight the About and Archive. The About will take you to a page which will talk a little bit about DASK, as well as that we've included our annual report, which is a story map version of the annual report that shows a summary of DASK. It's a nice scrollable option, summary of DASK, as well as highlights all the different projects we've worked on this year. Talks about funding, our hub site, 911, specifically to this last fiscal year. So if you're interested in knowing more about the DASK website and what we've done this past year, please check that out. And then scrolling down a little further, I wanted to highlight our staff. So you're probably wondering, how much staff do you have to do the things you do? There are 10 of us in total. Not all of us are 100% on DASK Clearinghouse with all these different projects we've talked about. There's, a couple staff are dedicated primarily to like the Next Gen 911 project or to different projects. And a lot of us are on multiple projects. So it just kind of depends on where the resources need to be allocated and the expertise are needed. But it's really a great, talented group that works well together and comes up with some amazing applications and solutions for people. Okay, the very final thing is Archive. So if I click on Archive, it'll bring up our Archive Hub. So we thought this was, kind of our clever take on, we didn't want to leave any data behind. We want to make sure all data still could be found, but archived data or older data that maybe has been deprecated or replaced really shouldn't be highlighted as like the most relevant data on the hub. So we came up with this Archive Hub. So if you're looking for any other historical data, same kind of thing, you could do a search or just click on the all data to see what kind of content is here. And these are things like an older hospital point layer, older data from the US Census data that's dated, maybe it's 2010, 1990, things like that. So data that we didn't want to remove, but we wanted to archive and properly kind of show that there's a replacement of it, but still people might need this data. So we essentially have two hubs. We have the Kansas Archive Data Hub, as well as our primary GeoPortal hub. Okay, sorry, I went over to time a little bit there. I didn't mean to, but I will stop now and would love to hear any questions you have.
Any questions? Doug. I'm sorry, Representative Blex.
Well, we're pretty informal day. Thank you, Eileen. It's been a while since I've used the program. It looks like you've really updated that. I guess my question is, I think I know the answer. Most of this, is this a free subscription? And you mentioned login. Do you have to create an account? And is this data accessible without a high-powered computer, say like a cell phone in the field?
So great question. So for our website, that's all public domain open data. So anyone can search, look around, interact with the data. And it works pretty well on a mobile phone. There's a lot of data, some big data that might be tricky to look at on a mobile phone, but it is somewhat mobile compatible. But yeah, the website's open, no login required. The only time a login is required is if you want to do some more advanced things. Like if you wanted to download the data into a cloud platform or put it in your own GIS software, that's where you might need a login or a different, or actually desktop software package to use the data.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I was hoping Representative Cywert was there. I was going to ask him for a water right. Is there anybody here in the room want to look up one of their water rights as a quick demonstration? Eileen, could you do that?
Let's see here. Let me open that up. Just give me 1 second. And let's see here.
I played around with it here a couple weeks ago, and it was really interesting. I could look up my wells. I could look at the neighbors, the drilling data from when they were put in, when the water rights started. There's all kinds of things out there on water. If I was a municipal and I wanted to look at our wells versus the irrigation wells next door, or maybe potentially purchase some water rights in the future, it's a quick reference to look through something like that and come up with the information.
Yeah,
Eileen?
yeah. Are you referring to the just this application? Oops, let's see here. It's not letting me share. Let me get back to sharing here. Try one more time.
I just added my account and I looked up one of my water rights, SC 109, a vested right in Scott County. And it gave me all kinds of information from the original company that drilled the well. A lot of that data was right there electronically. Your databases and your operation to me is like a great big library with all kinds of these databases and information. If we know what we want to search for, it's amazing all the things that are there.
Absolutely. And for that in particular, you could search through the Kansas Geological Surveys interface. If you're looking for a particular county or area, you could go right to the interactive map. Or you could just browse the data on the DASK website as well. So there are several different options to find this data. And you're right, we are kind of the geospatial library, so to speak, of the state, that if there's good geospatial data and it's publicly available, we like to get that out and make it as accessible in many ways as possible for anyone to use.
If I wanted to transport something across the state of Kansas, a heavy load, a long load or something, you can go online and check bridge capacities. I'm not sure if there's widths on there if I'm moving my farm machinery. I have a couple fields that I have a specific route that I can and can't get to them with certain pieces of equipment, but it's amazing the amount of information that's on here that KDOT, Division of Water Resources, everybody has kind of centralized their data here.
Yeah, absolutely. So for example, if you looked for, if I could type bridges, I believe KDOT has some, different state bridges, non-state bridges. That information's out here to view from KDOT to see where the bridges are and probably whatever information might be associated with that. Let's just zoom in here. So for example, there's some bridge information with a identifier. I guess these are the bridges, so I have to look at the metadata myself because I'm not a subject matter expert on all the data that we have, but this is the state bridges that are classified as structures greater than 20 feet in length. So for example, that's just on a quick search what I found, but you're right. If you just continue to search and kind of refine your search, what you're looking for, you should be able to find some sort of interactive map to kind of visualize what the data looks like. Any other questions for myself or for Ken?
You're doing great, Eileen.
Thanks. Absolutely.
Representative Pickard has a question.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I don't have a question, but I thought it was interesting. Gates was listed, gates and hydrants for 911. In my district, there's a gate between two communities. I mean, they're just side by side. And when I was walking door to door, I couldn't get through. But I was thinking about emergency vehicles, to get somewhere to have those gates. That'd be pretty handy. And hydrants too. I mean, yeah, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of a local decision if they've got the resources to submit that additional data. So there are, I know at least Riley County and a few others do submit gates because there's some important gate information about for emergency response to be able to get through those gates. And within the 911 system, it even will tell them things like maybe a contact or how to open the gate, just additional information that's helpful for a dispatcher to know what the gate is and how to help responders get around it.
Representative Kennedy.
I don't think I can hear you. I'm sorry, I could not
I
hear.
think she could hear you.
the
How
last
about
question.
now? Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Helps when I turn it on. Do you have an equivalent of the, so I've used in the past the old WEMIS tool that KGS has set up. Is that data set in here somewhere, or is WEMIS still a better way to look up individual water rights?
You can go either way. You can find it through the DASK hub, or you can go through the Kansas Geological Survey site to look up the WEMA sites. It kind of depends, again, which way you want to look at it. If you're just looking for a quick data layer you want to download and do something with, DASK might be more appropriate, or finding that application. But if you want to maybe filter through the data a specific way without the geographic portion of it, the Geological Survey is a good way to look at that data as well.
Thank you.
So it's all the same data behind the scenes. We're just trying to make it accessible in as many ways as possible, whether it's through a viewer or through an application or an interface, different things like that.
Representative White.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are there oil and gas information included in this? Can I look up an old oil well and find out how close it is to an old water well? Thank you.
Yeah, there is. So that's something that's a big project with the Kansas Geological Survey, and they actually have an oil and gas interactive mapper that you can view. And I can bring that up real quick here. Actually, let me show you where I found that. Let me go backwards and show that. Sorry, I didn't have that up to show. So if you go to the Kansas, always wants me to click twice to share. Okay, if you go to the Kansas Geological Survey's website, probably the quickest way to get that would be to go to the menu, oil and gas data, and then click on the oil and gas interactive mapper. We do have links to that on the DASK site as well. So that's one way to get to it. So I'm going to show you the other way. So again, it's all the same data behind the scenes. It's just a matter of which link you want to go through. Let's see, it's not highlighted there. Let me look over here.
Yeah, and as Eileen's bringing that up, with the survey's GIS section here, DASK is part of that. More of our focus is on geospatial data sets and service external to the agency. But as she mentioned, under the hood, for like oil and gas data, if you go to the application itself that she's illustrating here, it kind of gives you a combined sort of packaged experience of oil and gas and related data organized in a web application format. You can get to that through the hub, but if you are interested in just a specific layer, that's kind of what the Clearinghouse Hub website provides. So you could go and just download the oil well layer, or pull in the web service into your own application. And then where the applications, like the ones on the screen here, is really a kind of a combination of multiple layers that we feel are relevant to exploring oil and gas data. But as Eileen mentioned, the real power here is all the same data under the hood, constantly updated, brought in from the authoritative source, and then we can expose that through a variety of mechanisms to the user.
If I may, is there a way to overlay water wells and oil wells?
Yes, in this application that Eileen has up on the screen here, there are the WWC, the water well completion record wells in that table of contents. It's the 5th or 6th one down. And that will display here alongside the oil and gas wells. So that would be one way to do it. Again, if you're kind of coming at it from a data perspective and not the prepackaged application, you can, as Eileen was showing earlier, there's a create a map option. So you could make your own map, for example, and say, I just want to see aerial imagery of a certain vintage with oil wells and water wells. And that's all free on our website. Where a user account would come in is if you want to, say, save your work, you need to have an account to save that work under. We do have an enterprise agreement with the software manufacturer here called ESRI or ESRI, sometimes referred to, and for state agencies, and the legislature is also covered under that environment. So we could provide user accounts if somebody wanted to explore that. So again, exploring the hub, interacting with data, downloading data, all open source, free to anyone, doesn't require any specialized software or user accounts. That said, if you want to use this platform, save your work and do your own thing with it, then a user account does come into play there. But all, when I think back to where we started in the mid 90s and before, just the mechanics of trying to acquire a geospatial data set, even from our center, we might send a large data set out on a stack of 8mm tapes that then needed to be handed off to your computer technician and restored. Maybe it took a couple weeks just to get the data that you think you might want. Whereas now what Eileen's showing, you just hop online, interact with it. It works great on the desktop. It scales pretty well down to tablets and mobile devices as well, but you can just connect, use, and then go on from there. So the technology has really come a long way in terms of how we can expose the data beyond sending out stacks of CDs and tapes like we used to. So this is the really exciting piece for us is when others come in and say, hey, KGS, you built a great application, that's awesome, but I can just consume your data catalog, combine it in the way I want to see it, and do my own analysis. That's really exciting for us to see too.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So just a real life application here. If we had a groundwater source that was contaminated in a nearby rural water district, they could go online here, see where the residents actually are, and do their designation with several layers of maps. If you're trying to transport something across the state, you can look at the bridge structures and their carrying capacities and determine your route. There's lots of uses and or possibilities with this. I found it kind of interesting. But the water data on floodplains, even in your agricultural farm fields, you can look at LIDAR stuff that gets down to about 1 meter. The elevation changes. You can possibly see where a structure might have been 40 or 50 years ago that's no longer there. It's interesting, all the data that's out there. But any further questions?
This is Jay Calbus. I hoped to add just 2 quick supporting points, if I may, sir.
Sure, go ahead.
Just 2 quick examples. The integration of the oil well data with water studies is really an important one and an exciting one from the perspective of data accessibility. So I'll give one example. We're kicking off scientific studies in the Dakota Aquifer, which is an important secondary aquifer below the Ogallala throughout the central and western parts of Kansas. Our access into that aquifer, much of our information about the stratigraphy, the architecture, the geology of that unit itself is actually from the oil and gas data, because they log their wells as they go through and penetrate the Dakota Formation, our window into the geology of that unit and ultimately into its accessibility and usability for a secondary aquifer comes actually through the integration of those wells. So that's one. Another exciting example of the impact of the high resolution surficial imagery, especially the time series that Ken and Eileen were showing, is on applications like stream bank erosion. We can get a much more detailed understanding, sort of from a civil engineering perspective, as well as a geology engineering perspective, of stream banks and those types of projects from the serial imagery that we get over years' times. So another, kind of two examples, one from the subsurface as well as one from the surface.
Jay, I have a follow-up question. I believe in 24, your group was going to map the GMD4 area with the sensor hung beneath a helicopter. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. We are working plans right now with a vendor to set up and then to do the survey. It'll be about a week's worth of survey. It's called airborne electromagnetics surveying. So it's you sling load an array from a base of a helicopter, and you fly sort of in a serial section across the area. And that should give us a much better understanding of the subsurface aquifer conditions, the geology, as well as where the water is. That effectively allows us to integrate the well data into a three-dimensional perspective that should give us a much better sense of the hydraulic conductivity of the unit itself. So we're progressing plans to do that survey most likely in the June timeframe. And we'll be working a series of community engagements, plans and discussions in the community itself in GMD4.
In that particular data, a 3D picture of what the Ogallala Aquifer is in GMD4 would be available on the DASK site in a year or two?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure how we'll actually be able to represent the data. That'll be a technical question. We'll give serial images. They would be like serial cross sections as well as plan view maps looking down. I'm not sure actually what the final format and accessibility will be. Ultimately, the power of the data is that they will integrate into three-dimensional models, fully three-dimensional models, numerical models of the Ogallala Aquifer in that area. We'll have to figure out, working with our scientists and technicians, the best way to represent slices from those data and results from those data. But yes, they'll be available as we process through the data. We'll do an early reprocessing of the data almost as soon as we acquire it from the vendor. So that would be in the late summer timeframe of 2024. And then our goal is to get usable information out of those models as quickly as we can in the late summer and early fall of 2024.
To me, that's amazing that we can get a 3D picture or a modeling that accurate. Any further questions here? All right, I want to thank you, Jay and Ken and Eileen. I appreciate it very much. That was a lot of information for us to absorb, but I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate the opportunity to present to the committee and all of your time this morning. Is not often we get an hour and a half of someone's time, so we definitely appreciate it and happy to answer any follow-up questions that might come up or come back and speak with you all again. We appreciate it.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thanks, sir.
Committee, I think in your folder you'll find, Tony, we have a set of committee rules and committee rules that we were bringing forward are basically exactly the same as last session, and we'll take a vote on that on Thursday to see if anybody has any objections, or we'll approve those. There is a lot of this information out there on the S drive. For people that are online, how many people did we have on WebEx today? 5 committee members there and about 8 of us here, which I appreciate each and every one of you coming in today. I hate to be a lone wolf and call for a meeting today, but we have very short days, meeting twice a week, and I want to cover as much area as possible. I know we have 4 or 5 bills that are coming this year. It's going to take more time for hearings and working those bills. But anything else for the good of the committee? Okay, we are adjourned.